I need you to raise your hand if you have ever been through something painful. You've ever suffered through something and you started to question the goodness of God because of what you were going through. Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Melody and I make faith-based content here on YouTube. I post new videos every single Monday, so if that's something you're interested in, definitely be sure and subscribe. I would love to have you join the family. All right, sis, I need you to participate with me real fast. I need you to raise your hand if you have ever been through something painful. You've ever suffered through something and you started to question the goodness of God because of what you were going through. You started to question whether you did something wrong. You started to question whether God had forgotten about you, and you started to believe the lies that suffering sells us. That God doesn't care, he's not with us, this can't be his best for me, I must have made a mistake. Is your hand up? Because sis, same. And so in today's video, we are really going to be combating these lies. We're going to be talking about and breaking down 5 promises from the Lord that we can write in our hearts and go back to time and time again and hold on to for our season of trial, of pain, of suffering, and oftentimes how the Bible words it, affliction. And so I want us to have the right perspective and the right belief about God, because what we believe about God is going to impact our thoughts during these seasons of trial. And what we think about God during these seasons of trial is going to impact our words. What we say is going to impact our actions. And so if we can get back up here, right, having thoughts that are consecrated and grounded in the truth found in the Bible, it is going to allow us to walk through these seasons, not letting the season and the lies of the enemy win. We want to be able to combat the lies of the enemy, and to be able to do that, we first have to recognize them. And to recognize the lies, we have to know the truth. So before we get into these 5 promises, I do just want to go ahead and pause here and thank the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. So I am a tried and true, as you guys already know, therapy plus Jesus girly. It has been so incredibly invaluable to have a licensed mental health professional that I meet with weekly, okay? I feel like weekly for me really does work, and BetterHelp makes it so easy for us to get paired up with a mental health professional that is Christian. As you click the link to sign up, you'll go through a really quick questionnaire, and that's where you're able to check that you want your therapist to be Christian, and then they do the hard work of finding a Christian therapist for you, get you paired up. But the great part is, if you feel like it is not the best fit for you, which definitely has happened to me before, they make it really easy for you to get paired up with someone new. I know for myself, over this last year and a half, walking through things that have been really challenging and struggling to feel like I can see God's hand in it, having someone who both understands practically what I'm walking through, but also has that same faith foundation and that same faith lens, and being able to point me back to the Lord has just made such an incredible difference. And so I always like to say this: if you are on the fences, let this be your sign. I will have a link down below. You can get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp counseling. Again, I'll have that link down below for you. All right, sis, with all of this in mind, let's just go ahead and dive on in to these 5 promises. So number 1 on our list today, the first promise of God that we can hold on to, coming straight from the Bible during our seasons of suffering, is that we are guaranteed to experience them. We are guaranteed to go through them. We did nothing wrong. You didn't hang a left turn when you should have gone right. You didn't not pray enough. You didn't not say the right prayer. There's nothing that you can do in this life to avoid suffering. There is nothing you can do in this life to protect yourself against the inevitable pain, trials, and tribulations. And so a verse I want to point us to, coming out of the book of John, it is John chapter 16 verse 33. Here Jesus himself is communicating to his disciples what they should expect in this life. And so I want us to read this together. Again, John 16:33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world. I think when we navigate suffering with this specific promise written on our hearts and at the forefront of our minds, it's going to allow us to not feel like we did something wrong. It's going to allow us to embrace the trial, embrace what is happening, and not try to run from it. When we try to avoid God's will for our life, oftentimes we think God's will is the good thing. Sis, God's will sometimes is the suffering too. We want to submit fully to his plan, his will, his timing, and everything that he has for us in this life, including the suffering. And holding on to this promise allows us to do that. So number 2 on our list, the second promise coming straight from the Bible that we can hold on to during our season of suffering is that God sees us. I know for myself, as I've walked through what I've been walking through for the last year and a half, I really started to believe the lie that God didn't see me, that he didn't care about what I was going through, and he didn't care about all the emotions that I was experiencing. And then I came back to this truth that can be found in the book of Genesis, and it really helps to rewrite these lies and for us to see them for what they are. We serve a God who sees us in our pain. And so I want us to read the verse, but for us to first read the verse, I kind of got to paint this scene and kind of explain the situation that we're going to be jumping into. So this particular verse is coming out of Genesis chapter 16. And at this point in the book of Genesis, we are introduced to Hagar. Hagar is Sarah's servant. Sarah is married to Abraham. God gave Abraham a promise that Abraham was going to have a son. And the problem here is that Abraham and Sarah, his wife, are really old. And so it's been 15 years. They're getting even older. And Sarah is starting to feel like, is this promise ever going to come to pass? It's giving impatience, it's giving doubt, and she gives into her fears here and decides, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And so a common practice at this time was to give your husband, your servant, your maid, to have children through them. And so that's what Sarah did. So Sarah decides that through Hagar, she's going to have a son. Abraham agrees, and Hagar now is pregnant. And so at this point in the story, Hagar is pregnant. She's been treated really badly by Sarah. We aren't given specifics, but we can assume there's some level of abuse, whether it's physical abuse, mental abuse. And Hagar is like, I'm done. You know what I mean? I'm done. I'm going home. And so from the land where she is, she decides that she's going to trek back to Egypt. This was an impossible mission, an impossible journey, and is on this journey where she meets the Lord, or rather the Lord interrupts her plans and meets her. And so the Lord asks her, hey, where are you going? She ends up having a conversation with the Lord. And it is here where we are going to see the promise and a name that Hagar gives God that points to the fact that he sees us in our pain and our trials and through our suffering. So let's go ahead and read it together. This is Genesis chapter 16, verse 33. And I want to read this in 2 different versions. The first one is the ESV. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. For she said, truly here, I have seen him who looks after me. And then the next version I want to read it in is the CSB. And it says, so she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roy. For she said, in this place have I actually seen the one who sees me. And so this particular promise has been really impactful in my own walk, really just rewriting the narrative of how I view God. He is not just someone up high in heaven, negligent to the things that I'm going through, uncaring to the small ways in which my heart is hurting or that I'm struggling with something. He truly sees me, and he sees you too, sis. And so that is going to be promise number 2. So promise number 3 on our list today, the third promise coming straight out of the Bible that we can hold on to during our season of suffering, is that God not only sees us, going back to promise number 2, but he is with us. And so this particular promise comes out of the book of Psalms. I'm gonna go ahead and pop it up on the screen so we can read it together. It is Psalms chapter 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. With this particular verse, the author here, which is likely David, is letting us know where God is in relation to the things that we're going through. He is not just caring about it. He is not just seeing us, but he is with us. He is close to the brokenhearted. His presence is our guarantee during these times. Yes, a guarantee all the time, but specifically during these brokenhearted, trial-filled, suffering-filled times. And so the next time that we're believing that God isn't with us, that he's not going through this thing with us that he can't understand, sis, we need to go back to this verse. He is close to the brokenhearted. Like, that is how good our God is. You are never alone, sis. So do not believe the lie. Do not believe that there is anything that you feel that Christ himself has not felt. And in that, he is our perfect comforter. And that actually leads into promise number 4. But that is just, yeah, that is the truth that we have to hold on to when it comes to this particular promise, promise number 3. So promise number 4 on our list today, and just a little heads up, promise number 4 and promise number 5 on our list really start to put our suffering into perspective as to why, really giving us an insight into what is God's purpose when it comes to our suffering. Promise number 4 here is that God is going to comfort us in our suffering, and we, because of what we suffered, will be able to comfort others. So before I dive too far into that, I want us to just go ahead and read these verses together. It is coming out of 2 Corinthians. I'm gonna go ahead and pop it up on the screen. So this is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4 through 7. He comforts us in all of our affliction so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as the suffering of Christ overflows to us, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same suffering that we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that as you share in the sufferings, you will also share in the comfort. And so with this particular promise, it really starts to give our suffering perspective. It really starts to change how we walk throughout a day. Instead of focusing on the pain, instead of focusing on the thing that we wish we weren't going through, instead of focusing on the emotional experience that we're having because of the pain, we now are able to walk through a day looking for God's comfort. And the more that we look for God's comfort, the more that we're going to find it. The more that we're expectant for the Lord to show up for us because he sees us, okay? Promise 2, and he's with us. Promise 3, the more that we're able to experience his comfort. And the more that we're able to experience his comfort, the more that we see him and see these promises as fact. And so that is going to be promise number 4. Now let's go ahead and wrap it up with promise number 5. So number 5 on our list, the 5th and final promise from God that we can hold on to during our seasons of suffering is that as we do experience our suffering, it is going to allow us to not only learn God's ways, but also learn to obey him. And so before we get into this one, I also want to go ahead and start with the Bible verses. This is coming again from the book of Psalm. I'm gonna go ahead and pop it up on the screen. So Psalm chapter 119, verse 67 and verse 71. And so it says, "Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I obey your word. It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." And so here we are getting a glimpse coming from David into the reasons why and some of the beauty, the unexpected beauty that comes out of our affliction, that comes out of our pain. We learn God's ways in a way that prior, just like David said, I might have gone my own way, I might have gone astray, but now because of what I've been through, I now know that you are truly a God who sees me. You are truly a God who's there for me. You are truly a God who is with me. You are truly a comforter. And so the next time something comes at me, I now am gonna go your way because I know that what you have for me is better than what I might have for myself, and that you're trustworthy. And so as we go through the struggles, we go through the trials, we get to know the character of God that much more for ourselves. It's one thing to have head knowledge about all these ways in which God is good and kind and faithful, but it's another thing to experience it for ourselves. And it's oftentimes through the suffering that we do begin to experience it ourselves. So the second part of it is what David says also, is that it's through our affliction that we learn to obey his statutes. And so something I did to really understand this word statutes, right? David says, I learned to obey your statutes. And now statutes is not a word that I use in my day-to-day life. So I was like, all right, let me dive a little deeper into this word because I truly want to understand. And so sis, I want us to journey together and really unpack this word statutes because it truly speaks to the beauty of what God is doing during this season of suffering. So let's journey together. So in Hebrew, the word statutes comes out to this. I believe we would say hawk. You know what I mean? I really don't know. And so this basically means a statute, an ordinance, a limit, something prescribed or something do. And so when we think about something prescribes us, let's talk about a prescription. Sometimes we get these very individual prescriptions, right? Because they are going to assess and address an issue happening within us. Let's say I have a cold, my husband has the flu, I'm gonna get a different prescription than he's going to get. He's going to get something that's going to help what he's going through. I'm going to get something that's going to help what I'm going through. And so our suffering and our affliction that we experience is the same. It is prescribed to us individually by the Lord to produce results in us that he knows no other situation would be able to produce in us. And so sis, I challenge, I also encourage you to lean into what it is that God is doing in your life, whether it feels good or not. He is still a good father. And I think the more that we hold on to his character and who he is, the more that we'll be able to walk through these seasons with more joy in our heart, more peace in our heart, and knowing that we're not in it alone. All right, sis, that is going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And thank you once again to BetterHelp for partnering with me on today's video. Now, of course, it is your turn. So in the comments below, I would love to know, what is one promise of God that you hold on to during your seasons of going through the trials, going through the tribulations, and really just walking through suffering? What is a promise from God that you go back to? I feel like you never know how encouraging this is going to be for your next sis, and how we also might be pointing people back to the truth of who God is through the promises that we share. So definitely take a second, drop yours down below, and then take a scroll on through. As always, I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Peace.